Hi, I'm Mal from the Money Study, bringing you another episode of our Take 10 challenge. And we're up to number 102, part 11 of buying an investment property series we're doing at the moment. Should you buy a house for your investment property? Should you buy an apartment? What are the pros and cons? Let's have a look. But before we do, there's the disclaimer, facts and figures, information only, no advice in today's session. Okay, so do we buy an apartment? Do we buy a unit? Do we buy a townhouse? What are we really looking at, and what are the pros and cons? Generally speaking, and I love that word generally, it comes down obviously a lot in any of these sort of situations to do with property. Where are you buying? The old scenario of location. But generally speaking, houses have normally over time give a better capital gain. It's the land value that is the thing that maintains the value. That if, as land obviously is scarcity of land that's good for, been approved for housing, as prices go up, the more land you've got, generally speaking, the better your house will improve in value there. So having a house will normally give us better capital gain over time. Having said that, with the cost of housing being very, very expensive, you're getting the scenario that people just can't afford housing. And so there's been quite a demand now, of course, in recent years for apartments, and which, of course, is then pushing up the price of apartments. So it's a little bit of swings and roundabouts there. Over the longer term, we would normally expect houses to go up. In the shorter term, it's going to be very interesting to see whether this trend towards apartments, the younger generation are finding that living in apartments is quite suiting their lifestyle, where they can live in a big capital city, close to the cafes and the shops and so forth. A little bit difference that the mindset is not there so much as needing the quarter-acre block and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see whether this trend still continues or not. But traditionally, having that house on land has been a better way to go from appreciation of values there. So the pros of buying an apartment, affordability. Generally speaking, because they are cheaper, because of the fact there is no land or very little land, therefore cheaper to buy your investment property. The shared upkeep, meaning that you're not normally responsible for the upkeep. So if you, as an investment property, this could be a good thing, as you don't have to spend your weekends spending time fixing things. Not that you may want to do that anyway, you might want to hire someone, but that's an extra cost. So normally anything to do with the external part of the building as an apartment is taken into account through the body corporate. So generally speaking, easier to maintain. So just a few nice little benefits there of an apartment. The downside of an apartment, of course, is the fact, we've got the smaller land value. So what you're making up for affordability, you're losing in that land value on the other side. And of course, the advantages of having the maintenance being done through the body corporate is you've actually got to pay for it. And this can be expensive. And of course, body corporate will vary a lot depending on what type of, whether it is an apartment or a unit. Apartment blocks where they've got things like elevators and swimming pools and these sorts of things, the body corporate can be hellishly expensive to ensure that there's enough money to maintain those things. A small townhouse in a block of perhaps 4, the body corporate would be, generally speaking, quite low. So it just comes down to, again, the style of the property as to the cost of the body corporate. The issue with apartments, generally speaking, is we don't have as much control over them for alterations. So that if you were trying to upgrade, even something simple as a friend of ours had an investment property, it had carpet, but the carpet made it look a bit daggy. They were looking at upgrading the carpet, and then they thought that perhaps for a rental and to make it look perhaps more modern, they'd look at putting in some floating floor. Now, they actually had to get that approved by the body corporate just to get the carpet changed to to floating floor. Now, luckily they're on the ground floor, in which case they were apparently that wasn't a problem. Had they been on a second floor, then they suggest that they're not keen on having that floating floor, literally because of the noise then going down to the apartment below, whereas carpet sort of absorbs the sound more. So yeah, if you're trying to improve your apartment to make it look more modern perhaps, you've got to be careful that you may not be able to do it, literally because of the body corporate got their rules and regulations, meaning even sometimes as far as the window coverings, the curtains and so forth. They want to keep things uniform perhaps, in which case you can't put in sort of shutters and so forth. Not all body corporates are that strict. It just comes down to, again, the body corporate, where it is and the type of a building that you do indeed have. This last dot point, interesting, whether this is a problem or not, in the fact that they're looking in place, I'm in Canberra, looking at the number of apartments that have been built in Canberra is just, to me, it seems insane that you just go for a drive in sort of out in some of the northern suburbs and out, or even in some of the western suburbs and so forth, and it's just apartment after apartment after apartment, townhouse after townhouse and so forth. And you just sort of look at it and go, well, surely some people want to buy a house. There just seems to be a hell of a supply, but they keep on telling us that there's a shortage of apartments. Whether there is going to be the shortage continuing on if they build them at the same rate, I really don't know. So there is an increasing supply, but accordingly, apparently, there's still that increasing demand. So it always just comes down to that old story of supply and demand as to whether this is going to be a problem or not. And of course, at the speed that they get built, there seems to be a lot of apartments being built, and once they all come online, whether then they've got a glut is, I think, only time will tell. But it's just a case of doing your homework and getting the numbers to find out whether whether it's going to be a problem or not. But of course, as I say, it always just comes down to where are you? What suburb are you in? What city are you in? What's the increase in population? What's the migration? So many factors will obviously impact on supply and demand. What to look for now, irrespective, of course, irrespective of whether you're buying a house or you're buying an apartment or you're buying a townhouse, it really, what you're looking for pretty much comes down to the same things. Ideally, good rental yield. If we can get good income coming in, then the pressure is not there on our cash flow. And it also means that we're not having to worry so much about our capital growth. And obviously we're looking for capital growth as well. But if capital growth's a bit slow, then so long as we're not too negatively geared and we're hopefully neutrally or positively geared, this thing is making us money, then having a good rental yield will get us through until such time as the capital growth has another spurt. We're looking for low vacancy rates, so we're looking for a popular area where people want to live, generally speaking, close to the action, in places like Melbourne, Sydney, close to train stations, close to universities perhaps, depending on your market or what sort of rental person you are indeed looking for. So if you're looking for good capital growth, we're looking for a popular suburb where it may not be a popular suburb right now. It may be one of those suburbs that was perhaps industrial, but is now becoming one of those little gems that it's closer to the city, and bit by bit people are moving into that area and sort of gentrifying it, or it's becoming trendy because there's more coffee shops or whatever. I mean, they are the sort of suburbs that can be really wonderful if you can, a bit of foresight, see that a suburb that really was not a popular suburb in the past, but is looking like it could be a good suburb in the future, they're the sort of ones that where you could really make good money. We're looking for a property where there's no restrictions going forward as to other restrictions that could impinge upon capital growth. We don't want sort of planning restrictions that could hamper. Sometimes where there is a restriction, there's no further housing, that could indeed push up the price. So it depends on what is the restriction, what is the restriction we're talking about here, and what impact would that have on housing prices and so forth. Look, I mean, being familiar with an area can be very useful, so you know the area, but don't just go pick an area because, you know, it's where you live, because if you've already own your own home, to have another house in the same area just because you know it, unless obviously it is an area you believe that's really going to take off, ideally a bit of diversification, but do your homework, do your research. This familiarity thing can be good, can be a problem, depending on, can you stand back from your decision to really make sure is it a decision that actually makes sense. And I say that's that same thing. It goes, don't just buy a property because you can see yourself living there. Well, unless you want to live there, of course. You know, you might have some very unusual tastes in houses, dare I say. Low maintenance, obviously, unless you're the sort of person that is like got building skills where you've purposely bought a property that's going to need some upgrade over time, and you've got the ability and the time to do it. So therefore you can make some good capital growth on that by basically fixing it up over time. And we've already been hinting and talking about these seminars and so forth. Do your homework. Don't just buy a property because after going to a property seminar, they've got some properties for you to sell. Generally speaking, you need to look very, very closely by going to a property developer. If they're going to sell it to you, they're going to maintain it for you, they're going to do the legal work for you, they're going to do all the rental for you. Please look a lot closer at that situation. Okay, I look forward to you joining me on another session.